I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great episode for you today, folks. You probably saw the Circus the Clown show in Ottawa yesterday. Prime Minister Mark Carney was out with his new, shiny new cabinet, which happened to be basically the exact same as the Justin Trudeau cabinet. We're going to go through all of it, including the legacy media doing what they do, spinning and twisting the truth to try to promote their man, Mark Carney. I'm very pleased today to be joined by one of my favorite guests on the Candice Malcolm Show, talking about Jasmin Laine. Jasmin is a political news commentator and the host of the Over Opinionated podcast. Jasmin, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Lots to talk about.
As usual, yes. Okay, so the news was Carney announced a new smaller cabinet, 28-minister cabinet, and yes, more than half of them were drawn from Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Check out this piece by Juno News. I love this headline. These ministers wrecked Canada, and Carney just promoted all of them. And so you'll see a lot of similar names that we saw, that we lived through with Justin Trudeau. I will just name a few. So Dominic LeBlanc is going to be the Minister of Trade, Melanie Joly, the Ministry of Industry, Francois-Philippe Champagne, the Minister of Finance, Anita Anand, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Patty Hajdu, Minister of Jobs and Family, Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Identity, Culture and Official Languages, Sean Fraser, Minister of Justice, Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. Many of the same names. I could go on. There's a few newcomers. We have Evan Solomon, who is the newly named Minister of Artificial Intelligence. Also, Gregor Robertson, who is a former hard-left socialist mayor of Vancouver, who's going to be the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. My colleague over at True North, Sue-Ann Levy, pointed out that the new Minister of Immigration, well, she calls her a Jew hater. Oh my goodness. Lena Metleg-Diab, Sue-Ann Levy says, very nice to see Mark Carney installed this woman of Lebanese descent who hates Israel. And then she clarified, because at first she said that she signed this Vote Palestine platform calling for basically the obliteration of Israel. She apologized, saying that she didn't sign that one, but she did vote against, or she voted for an arms embargo against Israel. Same difference. So yikes. But I don't know, when it comes to what we should expect from this government, I think it really does just seem like a continuation of Justin Trudeau, from, open borders and mass immigration in that category, promoting Sean Fraser, who was, sort of the disastrous housing and immigration minister, and putting him in there. It really just seems like doubling down on the same failed approaches. What was your take from this yesterday, Jasmin?
Obviously, a lot of people failed upwards, which doesn't typically happen in real life. But there were so many things. And it's one of those, it's such a jarring difference in the, Canadian ministers, if you want to go and compare them to other nations, where there are quite literally people who are, for lack of better words, career politicians, and not the good kind that are actually trying to help you, but the kind who do it for the money, for the most part, is kind of what I can see. It's just bizarre. I mean, if you even want to think about Evan Solomon, if you recall, there was that viral post from the bus that was created by AI that he reshared, and now, of course, he is the AI minister. When, his background, what is he? He's a former journalist. He got fired from CBC after an art dealing with Mark Carney. That's
an important point. I just want to zoom in on that one for a minute, because folks might not remember this. Evan Solomon was sort of a mainstay CBC journalist. He was the one that hosted Power and Politics and interviewed all of the cabinet ministers. He was always, you could tell he was a partisan liberal, but back then he pretended to be a journalist. And he got fired in disgrace for basically selling art, like being the middleman in peddling art to get big commissions to the people that he was interviewing. The main person that was in a lot of the headlines was Jim Basile, one of the founders of BlackBerry at the time, one of the wealthiest Canadians. But one of the other people involved in that scandal was none other than Mark Carney. Mark Carney himself was one of the people that Evan Solomon was dealing art to behind the scenes, kind of in conflict of the CBC's ethics policies. And then get this, Jasmin, when he was fired in disgrace, he, I guess, again, failed upwards, but he got involved with the Eurasia Group, where
Yep.
Mark Carney's wife is involved. She works there. And where Mark Carney's advisor, Gerald Butts, who's Justin Trudeau's best friend, also worked there. So they're all involved in this risk consultant management, global finance company or think tank called Eurasia Group. And Evan Solomon was the publisher of this magazine that they had internally. So, really just like a very much like an insider's web in this sort of like globalist world. But really interesting that he's kind of considered an outsider in this cabinet.
It's I don't want to go off too much, but I just flashing back to even just his skills and being, the AI minister. He's never even worked in the tech industry. He was a fired journalist for essentially, in terms of art commissions, like insider trading, basically. And then if you just compare that to, Donald Trump's team and who David Sachs is, and he's the guy who's in charge of all of the AIs, their AI czar, and he helped build PayPal. He's done so many things, had so much success when it comes to tech entrepreneurship in comparison. And then you have Evan Solomon. Like, it's like, wow, Canada just has some of the most underqualified people that exist in our parliament. And it just makes absolutely no sense to me. And, I really do think this is something so many of us have been talking about and speculating on for quite some time. But in terms of Mark Carney's cabinet, it's just filled, and just Mark Carney as a whole and the people, the company that he keeps, you have this issue that happens with Evan Solomon, and then all of a sudden he starts working for the Eurasia Group. Why would he do that? I wonder why he would do that. Like, think about that, right? And then, oh, just kidding. I'm actually going to now jump into politics for the first time in my life, win by a landslide, and now I'm a minister. It's just, and I have no shade at all in people who are first-time ministers. Of course, everybody starts from somewhere, but my goodness, at the very least, I would like for you to have some sort of past expertise in the areas of which you are ministering. So when it comes to this entire cabinet, it really is just, to me, it's rewarding a lot of people, 50% roughly, of which have failed and have done a really bad job. And, another detail there, too, is Mark Carney had said that he wanted 50% of his cabinet to be female, 50% to be male. And I'm just personally kind of over that. Like, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of incredibly capable women. However, 50% of them, I'm sure not every single one of them is absolutely qualified for the positions of which they were promoted to. And I'm just really over that type of hiring. And I think that type of promotion and rewarding is what has gotten Canada into such a mess because, our government for many, many years now has prioritized DEI standards over people who are just really good at their job.
100%. I mean, this was one of the downfalls of the Trudeau government is that they were obsessed with putting out these like gender balanced budgets. Everything had to be looked through a gendered lens or wasting their time on this nonsense. Meanwhile, the real issues of the country are being neglected. And in many ways, they're throwing gasoline on the fire. And yes, when Justin Trudeau announced that 50% of his cabinet would be women, it was the women by and large that ended up basically a lot of them getting fired and getting thrown under the bus and not being properly qualified for the roles in the first place. And that was part of the damage of Justin Trudeau. Okay, well, here is Mark Carney speaking yesterday outside of Rideau Hall. He told reporters that his government will deliver its mandate for change. This is what change looks like, according to our Prime Minister. Let's play that clip.
Our government will deliver its mandate for change with urgency and determination. We're going to deliver that mandate with a new team, purpose-built for this hinge moment in Canada's history.
Now, to her credit, CTV's Vassy grilled Mark Carney, basically saying, these are the same people that we saw under Justin Trudeau. So let's play that clip.
Even when you point to the experience of those who are in the sort of biggest roles, the reason why I highlight them is because they were at the forefront of the decisions that the previous government made.
I disagree with that.
They were. I mean, Melanie Joly, François-Philippe Champagne, he led the industrial policy. Now he'll be in charge of finance. Dominic LeBlanc led a lot of those files as well. We are used to hearing from them, justifying and explaining the decisions that Justin Trudeau made.
Well,
so now we're going to hear from them again.
Well, first off, now you're hearing from me. I'm a new Prime Minister. I'm the 24th Prime Minister of Canada. I've got very clear set of objectives, which I laid out in the course of my initial government from that cabinet table. Cancel the carbon tax right there. I mean, there were so many differences. As I say, half of the cabinet is different. Big change in terms of priorities. Big change in terms of speed. This is one of the fastest swearing in Canadian history. It will be one of the fastest returns in Parliament in Canadian history.
I like how he wants credit for moving things along so that he can very quickly, very hastily move through his agenda. He got sworn in the first time as Prime Minister, it took him a week or two to actually trigger an election, which he should have done immediately, but he wanted to get a few trips into Europe under his belt before he called an election. And he called the shortest election period possible. So he's out there looking for points and expecting to be patted on the back by the legacy media. Well, we'll get to the fact that CBC actually did pat him on the back, and they do repeat him, his talking points. But it was nice to see CTV's Vassy GRILLS kind of push back on the nonsense a little bit. And it's always amusing to see how Mark Carney reacts when he gets a journalist with a bit of a backbone. You know, he clearly doesn't like the line of questioning there. What did you make of it?
Oh gosh. I mean, it is so disappointing to me to see the way that Mark Carney talks over people when he doesn't like what they're saying. I think that is, people will say, well, he's not a politician. And it's like, yeah, that's so great. You actually don't have to be a politician to actually just be a decent human being. But it is really fascinating to me to see him and just how frequently he will interrupt to try to course correct without even letting people finish their thoughts. That's something that I dislike so much whenever I see it. Doesn't matter what party is doing it. And I will say it was quite laughable, even Mark Carney being like, oh, well, you're hearing it from me now. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that doesn't make a difference at all. I don't care if we're hearing it from you. You are the same party. You have like 50% of the exact same ministers. This is the exact same team. So, yeah, you deserve to be questioned and called out, especially in terms of all of these people who you decided to stick with when they do have failed track records. And, you know, I think that Mark Carney could have had a much better likability, maybe even thrown some conservatives for a bit of a loop had he actually made some of those big changes. And I think if there's anything at all that we can tell, it's that there's no big changes. He's going to keep telling us that there are, but there just simply are not.
Right. Well, this is something that conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pointed out. Here is a clip of him reacting to Carney's cabinet picks, basically highlighting the failed record of the ministers that Mark Carney has just promoted. Let's play that clip.
The first disappointment is, unfortunately, his cabinet. He appointed Trudeau's old team and Trudeau's old advisors. Stephen Guilbeault, whose radical green agenda would shut down all future developments in our resource industry, is still the minister responsible for Quebec. Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis, the housing minister who gave us the housing crisis, and now he's the minister responsible for addressing the Liberal crime crisis. It seems like he is the master at failing upward. Then there's François-Philippe Champagne, Trudeau's Minister of Everything, who never really managed to do anything. Then there's Joly, LeBlanc, Haidu, Anand. Anand was the president of the Treasury Board, during which time the bureaucracy and the consultant bills blew out of control. In all, 14 Trudeau ministers are now in Carney's cabinet. It's more of the same when Canada needs real change.
So Poilievre doing what he should do. He's the opposition minister. Now, you pointed this out on X, Jasmin. You write this in 2 minutes. CBC insults Pierre Poilievre, mocks him, defends Carney's cabinet picks, and reminds us how biased they are. Let's play. I don't know if we have the whole clip, but let's play this clip, and you can point out your favorite parts of it.
Cabinet is broken, is essentially what he said, right? It's no longer Canada's broken. He's saying this cabinet is not changed. A style and approach from Mr. Poilievre, Rosie, that would suggest it's almost as if he won the election rather than lost the election and lost his own seat. You know, talking about how he's going to stand there in defense of Canadians. He'll only be able to stand there, actually, in the chamber behind him because of the goodwill of the Prime Minister, who's going to call an early by-election for Mr. Poilievre so he can run in one of his MP seats in Alberta at the cost of close to $2 million to have a by-election, all while he stays in Stornoway throughout this. So it's interesting that given that sequence of events and given those series of factors, that it was that kind of approach and response to things there from Mr. Poilievre. Going after Stephen Guilbeault, talking about the radical environmental agenda, blaming Sean Fraser for the housing crisis, which is... Sean Fraser's I don't think he's 40 yet, or he's just 40. I don't think he caused the housing crisis in Canada.
Not.
There's a whole bunch of layers and effects to that. But, you know, wanting to fight the same political battles we just endured during the 5 weeks of the campaign and for the 2 years leading up to that.
Now, I get that the CBC is mostly funded by taxpayers, and that is mostly because of the Liberal government who keeps doubling down and increasing their budget. But the CBC hosts don't have to act like they work for the Liberal Party of Canada. Like, it's okay for them to at least pretend to be moderate. They don't even try. I mean, David Cochran there sounds like Mark Carney's press secretary. It sounds like he's out there just towing the party line and defending his team. What are your comments?
Oh boy, do I ever have a lot. First and foremost, it's fascinating to hear the deflection of, oh, well, Sean Fraser, he's only 40, so he definitely didn't cause that crisis. And you have Rosemary Barton. No, probably not. It's like, okay, well, so if ministers have no involvement and no accountability when things go wrong, and if you look at the data from when they were hired and assigned to certain portfolios and the downward trend that has existed, but if they can't be held accountable and they, according to CBC, have absolutely no influence, why are they ministers? Why do we have any of those positions to begin with? If that's the case, then maybe we should just have a prime minister and everybody else is just a waste of taxpayer dollars. So they kind of bit themselves with that one because it just doesn't make logical sense. But whatever, deflect, defame, and defend at all costs. I'm also wondering if David Cochran plans to complain as much about the by-election in Terrebonne, which is due to the Elections Canada issue, as he has been complaining about the by-election in Battle River Crowfoot with Pierre Poilievre. I won't hold my breath for that one, but there's just so many things about this where the bias is so unreal, and it's okay to have a bias. We all do. We're human beings. But when you work for, the public broadcaster essentially, and you present news as though you don't have a bias and then proceed to tell everybody what your bias is and everything that you do and say, it's just very disingenuous. It's misleading. And I'm quite tired of it. And myself as well, I worked in mainstream media for 11 years of my career before going independent. And I absolutely believe that the CBC should be defunded. I don't want to see people lose their jobs, but I want them to be defunded for reasons like this, where it's not honest at all. And it's just very disappointing. And it's no wonder why so many Canadians have no idea how the political system works, because clips like this go viral and people share them and people do watch. It's a low percentage, but they do. And it just, to sit there and mock kind of the role of the leader of the opposition. Like, I'm sorry. So what do you want him to do then? You want Pierre Poilievre to be the prime minister? That would make sense because you're very supportive of all of Carney's ideas that he's taken from Mr. Poilievre. But there's so many people out there who they have a lot to say, a lot of opinions, and they actually have no idea what the roles of a minister, of a prime minister, of a premier, of a mayor, like they just don't actually understand the levels there. And that's fine. I don't blame them. It's confusing and it's a lot to understand. But when it comes to CBC, I'm starting to get very tired of them.
Well, it's so true that the role of the official opposition is to criticize the government. That is her job. And Pierre Poilievre actually, in his speech, if we had played a longer bit, he said, look, I am going to stand with the government when I believe in what they're doing is right. If I agree with the approach they're taking to defending Canada and national security, I will come out and say it. However, when they make big mistakes, when they do things that harm the economy, harm the housing market, I'm gonna be there to hold them accountable. And to me, it was David Cochran. I mean, sure, I would probably prefer it if he just came out and said, "Look, everyone, you probably could tell by the way that I talk, but I do vote Liberal. I love the Liberal Party of Canada. I have, I have the party card in my pocket, right? Whatever he's gonna say, I would actually have a bit more respect for him than that, and I would maybe question why the CBC would have like 4 card-carrying members of the Liberal Party who host all of their shows, but that's kind of a conversation for the day. It's like, at the end of the day, though, like you're on the public broadcaster. Your job is to report the news to Canadians. Why the snark, right? Why does he have to go, oh, there's Pierre Poilievre who lost his own seat. He's acting like he won, but he actually lost his own seat. And like later in the broadcast as well, they were talking about how he should really be showing some gratitude to Mark Carney because Mark Carney is allowing him to have a by-election. He didn't have to do that.
Democracy.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Carney didn't have to let Pierre Poilievre have a seat back in the House of Commons. Like he's the king. He's the monarch now. He has utter control over everything. So he could have blocked Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, from having a seat. He could have said, we're not going to do a by-election until September. But he would have had so much pushback and criticism on him. And then same thing that, yes, I guess according to the official rules, Pierre Poilievre shouldn't be living in Stornoway. Stornoway is the home of the official opposition, which is a role in Parliament, right? And technically, Pierre Poilievre is not the leader of the official opposition right now because he's not a parliamentarian. Once he has the by-election, he gets his seat back, then he will become it. So technically, Mark Carney could have evicted him from Stornoway. He could have had him move out for the summer, and then as soon as by-election happened, he could have moved back in. But that would have been incredibly petty, first of all, and incredibly costly to taxpayers. So the CBC wants to give Carney credit for these really trivial things. And they want to criticize Pierre Poilievre for, again, very trivial things. Like, I was critical of the party. I was critical of Poilievre's team for allowing him to lose his seat in Carleton. I think that they could have done a lot more to make sure that he got that seat because it was quite embarrassing for him to lose that seat. But there's the CBC, really kind of putting salt in the wounds, like rubbing it in. Oh, it's going to cost $2 million of taxpayer money for this by-election. So Pierre Poilievre, you should be apologizing for that. Just everything about that segment and that piece, this is just the epitome of why half the country hates the CBC and why they just absolutely need to be defunded.
It really blows my mind, too, because at the end of the day, when it comes to details like that, it's one thing to criticize somebody because they spent, millions of taxpayer dollars funding somewhere in, Aruba, how beneficial it would be to eat bugs. But it's another thing to criticize a party because the taxpayers are funding for democracy. Wasn't that what you kept telling us the Conservatives and Donald Trump was going to take away? Right. Oh, okay. Weird. And, at the end of the day, I really, truly, I just like to try to flip the script, well, I wonder what they would say if Pierre Poilievre had won the election and Mark Carney was now moving out of Canada again because he had no interest to actually be here because none of his business is here. I wonder how they would then try to defend it, because these types of things, it really is, it's such a nothing sandwich. It is. And it's just there's so many weak points that have no merit, that, are very loose in how they are described. They're very misleading, that people, particularly the left, go off of to try to insult the Conservatives. And the only thing that ever comes to mind for me whenever I hear things like that is, number one, you're mean and I probably wouldn't have been friends with you in high school. And number two, you literally have nothing to go off of here. You don't. You have so little to go off of to try to push out Supreme Leader Mark Carney that you have to go and criticize democracy in Canada and promote, oh, wow, he's so great for allowing that to happen. It's what? Duh. It's such a nothing sandwich. And it's just very frustrating to hear on the daily. And I have also noticed, I don't know if you have, that CBC, they've always been left-leaning. I would say they've been particularly left-leaning since probably 1997, roughly. Then they were a little bit more central. And then when Justin Trudeau was running against Stephen Harper, similar to this election, Harper had said that he was going to be cutting some of their funding, and Justin Trudeau said he was going to be increasing it. And we saw the tides turn with how they reported. That should be a wake-up call to anybody. But then with this election campaign and with how hard Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives were saying we should defund them, I certainly noticed just a newfound confidence of CBC broadcasters to push out as much smear as they can, to push out as much narrative as they can. And it's been really disappointing and just gross. I don't know how else to explain it to witness.
Well, it's true. It's they're feeding their base, right? They know that the base of the Liberal Party is the same as the viewers of the CBC, and they actually love it when they go low and they take cheap shots at Poilievre, and they're helping to further the partisan divide in this country. It's sad, right? They watch Pierre Poilievre and they just hate him, and so it's very easy for them to point out all of his little flaws, and they don't realize that when they attack him, they're not just attacking him, right? Because regular people in Canada who identify with Pierre Poilievre and like him, they also feel like they're being attacked when the CBC does this routine. And you're right, they do it all the time. Okay, folks, we are going to be back. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to do another segment with Jasmin Laine. We're going to talk about election integrity. We're going to talk about that seat that she just mentioned and the potential by-election that's going to happen in Terrebonne, Quebec. So we will be right back for that one.